My name's Phil Smith. I'm going to follow Dan's perfect timing, clearly, which was very impressive, I've got to say, and clearly well rehearsed. So, I wanted to introduce you briefly to the research that will be published tomorrow. So, as I say, I run this Cisco for the UK and Ireland, and this research will work with Dan. We've known Dan for some time, and I think it's important that we give you just a little taster of that research over the next few days, few minutes. So, what's going to have the biggest impact? Why should we reduce carbon? And then what can we actually do about it? Because rising to the challenge is the important part of this. Just looking at the research isn't going to do us any good. So what we really need to do is to look at a number of areas. So we asked, what will have the biggest impact? Any suggestions which one of these four came out top? No, neither of those two actually, funnily enough. The one that actually came out highest was monitoring and measurement. So what people, and it was quite a high percentage, so nearly 60% of people said that monitoring and measurement is important. And actually running a business, knowing that actually you don't expect what you don't inspect. So if you don't look for something, you're not going to get it. So it's very, very important. But alternative and renewable energy clearly came out high. There's a big drive towards that, and clearly it's making a big difference at the moment. But it wasn't anything like as high as the measurement itself. Thankfully, we did see efficient IT. So efficient IT was recognised, about 40-odd%, 42%, I think you'll find, of people actually saw that efficient IT had a place to play in here, and we strongly believe that's going to be an important part, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But then also reduce to work and using other mechanisms of commuting was some way down, and that may be some illustration of the way the legislation is at the moment, which is clearly not necessarily targeting some of the travel-based issues that are there. So, if we then ask why would people reduce carbon? So once again, there should be a slide here that said, which one of these three came out as top?
Who are you asking?
About 250 business users around the UK. You can't answer it now, it's been up there for a while. So clearly cost savings came out hardest, and particularly I've talked to a few people tonight. It doesn't matter on the high ideals people had in 08. Come to 09, cost savings were definitely top of the tree. 60% of people said that cost savings was top of their agenda. Reducing carbon for the business clearly was important as well, which is good to see that hasn't disappeared completely, but I think it's a changing agenda at the moment. So reducing carbon emissions. Interestingly enough, below that came legislation, and I think that's partly because some of the views on the effectiveness of the legislation at the moment, and clearly the complexity of it, which I know we're going to get some insight into a little bit later on. And then, finally, and that really is looking at how we actually rise to the challenge. So, we believe that technology has a strong place to play in here, but clearly you have to take and put your best foot forward if you're going to do that. Because technology really is about behavioural change. So technology can help to meet the carbon targets, but it does require you to take a much more proactive stance. The problem is that in most cases people also answered, I think only 30% of people said that budgets would actually be set aside for technology change. So despite the fact that almost everybody saw technology had a part to play in this, very few believed that budgets would actually be allocated to it. So what we believe actually needs to happen, and some of this has come through the research, is said we need to see companies start to put investment dollars where their mouth is, so to speak. So somewhere that would actually allow them to put those dollars in the right place. Clearly measurement, as we saw from the results, is important. So the ability to measure carbon in itself is part of the key recipe here. Also, it's important that preparation and a proactive situation is taken on this, so companies can't just afford for the legislation to hit them. They actually have to be taking a proactive position and working on what that means from a behavioural change perspective, which is actually always the big issue in companies, change management. And that behavioural change has to be baked into the organisation. I can talk to you later on about some of the things we've done and some of the key customers have seen and the way they've actually baked that into their business and the way they do business. And of course, if you serve that with the legislation compliance, clearly CRC, as we'll hear, will make some difference as it starts to bite in April, but clearly there's still a long way to go on that, and I think from the views we saw about how important legislation was, that's an important part of it. So that's really all I had to say at the moment. There's clearly lots of research behind this to the point. It's about 250 people were surveyed in this, energy professionals and others. Interesting piece of information available at this site and obviously to be chatted about later. So thank you very much.